Have you ever
What are you
wondered
doing?
what a
Get them out
father
of
would
that
do
water right
if he
now.
walked
I'm
outside
bathing my
and saw his little
children. Stand
girls crying in a bucket of cold water? Would he blame himself or the woman he thought he could trust? This story will take you from heartbreak to hope and show how love can rise even from the coldest moments. Before we go on, allow me to wish you peace and good health. Tell me, from which country and at what time are you watching this story? Let me tell you something that happened by Monticello Lake. One quiet autumn morning. The air was cool, the kind that carried the scent of wet leaves and roasted coffee from the little diner down the hill. Mist hung low over the lake like a tired curtain, and the Vance house stood above it tall, perfect, and terribly still. From the outside, you would have thought a happy family lived there. Inside, silence ruled every corner like an old ghost that refused to leave. Elliot Vance sat at the breakfast table, his silver hair brushed neatly back, a cup of black coffee untouched in front of him. Across from him, the chair once belonging to his late wife remained empty. He had never moved it. It was the only trace of warmth left in a room of polished wood and cold marble. His new wife, Marina, swept in moments later, wrapped in a silk robe the color of morning fog. "You should eat something," she said softly, her tone smooth, practiced, like a song she'd sung too many times. He nodded, but his mind was somewhere else on the photograph by the window. A smiling woman holding two tiny babies, her hair catching the sunday. He didn't notice Marina's gaze harden. "It's been 3 years, Elliot," she said, pouring tea into a china cup. "You need to let go of the past." Her words fell gently, but there was a weight behind them, a quiet insistence that made him shift uncomfortably. Upstairs, May Whitlow, the longtime housekeeper, moved carefully through the nursery. At 61, she'd spent most of her life tending to other people's homes, but never one that felt quite so cold. The twin girls, Hazel and June, just 3 years old, sat on the rug, stacking wooden blocks. Their laughter was faint, like the echo of happier days. May smiled, brushing a curl from Hazel's forehead. "Breakfast, sweet pea," she whispered. But the child didn't move. "Not hungry," the little girl murmured, and her sister just shook her head. When Marina came in, the warmth left the room. "Still refusing to eat?" she asked. Her voice, though calm, had the sharpness of glass. "They'll learn," she said finally, turning away, her robe whispering against the floor. May's stomach tightened. Something about the way the woman spoke to those children, like they were porcelain dolls that needed polishing, never sat right with her. Later, when Elliot joined them in the dining hall, Marina smiled across the table, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "We make a lovely family, don't we?" she said, lifting her glass. The twins sat stiffly, their little feet not touching the floor. Elliot raised his glass out of habit more than belief. "To family," he said, but the sound of silverware clinking against porcelain was louder than their words. The day faded into a gray afternoon. Marina spent hours rearranging flowers that didn't need rearranging, while Elliot sat by the window, staring at the lake. From where he sat, he could see the faint outline of the diner lights, down below the only sign of life beyond their gate. May packed away toys and tried to hum softly to the twins, but the air in that house swallowed sound like fog swallowing light. That evening, Elliot passed by the nursery on his way to bed. The door was slightly ajar, and he could hear Marina inside, her voice a soft murmur. He thought of knocking, but something in him hesitated. Instead, he walked on, down the quiet hall, his steps slow, his reflection following him in the mirror, older, lonelier, a man haunted by the idea that he might have traded peace for perfection. Downstairs, the grandfather clock struck 10. Outside, the fog thickened again, crawling up the windows until the world beyond turned white. Marina closed the nursery door and whispered something to herself that no one heard. The twins slept soundlessly, their tiny hands resting near each other, their breathing shallow and synchronized, as if sharing the same uneasy dream. That night, as rain tapped against the windows, the house grew quieter than ever. Elliot lay awake in the dim bedroom, listening to the steady drip outside. Beside him, Marina slept soundly, her breathing even and calm, as if nothing in the world could disturb her. He envied that peace. It had been years since sleep came easily to him. Guilt had a way of keeping the mind busy, whispering reminders of what had once been a warm laugh, a promise left unkept, two tiny hands clutching his fingers. He rose, moving silently down the hall, his slippers brushing the old rug. Every door he passed seemed to carry a memory. The study where he once wrote music, the empty room where his wife used to paint, now filled with folded linens. When he reached the nursery, the faint light under the door caught his attention. He paused, listening. No sound. He turned the handle gently, just enough to peek inside. The room was dark except for the soft glow of a night lamp shaped like a rabbit. The twins slept side by side, small faces calm. May had tucked them in before leaving for the evening, humming that old lullaby, "You Are My Sunshine." The tune still lingered in the air somehow, faint but present, like a memory the walls refused to forget. Elliot smiled sadly. He was about to close the door when he noticed something odd, a faint scent of lavender soap and something sharper, almost metallic. He frowned, searching for its source, but saw nothing out of place, just toys, folded blankets, and the two tiny figures sleeping under their quilt. He sighed, closed the door, and turned away. Downstairs, the clock struck 11. The storm outside thickened. Wind rattled the shutters. Marina appeared at the top of the stairs, wrapped in a dark robe, her hair neatly tied. "Couldn't sleep?" she asked. Her voice was smooth as honey, but her eyes gleamed in the half-light. "I thought I heard something," Elliot said quietly. "Just the storm, darling," she replied, descending slowly. "You worry too much." They stood together by the window, watching the rain race down the glass. Marina rested her head on his shoulder, and for a moment, he let himself believe in the image they projected. A husband and wife, standing in harmony, their children safe upstairs. But beneath that calm, a strange unease coiled in his chest. May, in her small apartment across town, stirred awake at that very hour. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was the dream, the one where water rippled across the nursery floor, and the sound of a child's cry pierced the air. She sat up, heart thudding, whispering a prayer she hadn't said in years. Back at the mansion, thunder rolled over the lake. The lights flickered once, then steadied. The twins shifted in their sleep, murmuring softly. Marina brushed Elliot's arm and whispered something indistinct before heading upstairs again. He remained by the window, staring at the reflection of his own tired face. He barely noticed when the hall light dimmed, when the sound of running water echoed faintly from above. Moments later came the sound that made May sit up straight in bed, miles away, the one that didn't belong to any storm. A splash, then a baby's soft, startled cry. Morning came gray and still, the kind of morning when the world seems to hold its breath. Mist clung to the trees around Monticello Lake, and the chill in the air carried the scent of rain that hadn't quite left. Inside the Vance mansion, the quiet was heavy, broken only by the clatter of a spoon against porcelain and the hum of the refrigerator. May Whitlow arrived just after 7. Her small car, old and dependable, climbed the curved driveway slick with wet leaves. She wiped the fog from her windshield and glanced at the house. The curtains upstairs were drawn tight. Something about that sight made her uneasy. When she entered, the twins were already awake, sitting on the carpet of the nursery. Their faces were pale, their movements slow. A bowl of cereal sat untouched on the table beside them. "Good morning, my darlings," May said softly, forcing cheer into her voice. Hazel looked up with big, tired eyes. "It's cold," she whispered. May frowned. The window was closed. The heater was on low. "Cold, sweetheart?" she asked, touching the child's forehead warm enough. Then she heard it, the sound of running water from the bathroom. Steam drifted faintly under the door. May's heart sank. Marina appeared behind her, smiling as if nothing was wrong. "They're having their morning bath," she said, stepping past her. The robe she wore was spotless white, the belt tied perfectly. "Cold baths?" May asked, unable to hide the disbelief in her voice. "In this weather?" "Cold water builds resilience," Marina said calmly. "A strong body makes a strong mind." Her tone was soft but final, like a door closing. She turned to Hazel and June. "Now, girls, we don't want to disappoint Daddy, do we?" May hesitated. "Mrs. Vance," she began, "they're just babies." Marina's smile didn't falter. "May, you've worked for many families, I know. But in this one, we do things differently." She reached into the tub, stirred the water with her hand, and looked at May again. "It's not as cold as it feels." May bit her lip, watching the twins flinch as the water touched their skin. Hazel whimpered softly, and June clung to her sister's arm. May wanted to step forward, to pull them out, but her feet wouldn't move. Marina's presence filled the room, smooth and commanding. When Elliot came home from his morning walk, May met him by the stairs. "Mr. Vance," she said quickly, her hands twisting in her apron. "I don't think the twins should be bathed like that. They're trembling." He paused, frowning. "Cold water? I'm sure Marina knows what she's doing. She reads all those modern parenting books." May looked at him, at the man who used to notice everything. "With respect, sir, they're not books that raise children. People do." Elliot gave a weary smile, half apologetic, half distant. "May, please. Marina's just trying her best. It's been hard for her." She swallowed her reply and nodded. "Yes, sir." As he walked away, she turned to the lake outside, its surface rippling in the gray light. She pressed her hand to the glass. "God help those little ones," she whispered. By afternoon, the clouds had cleared, but the chill lingered. May folded tiny sweaters in the laundry room, her thoughts restless. The house was too quiet again, the kind of quiet that didn't feel peaceful but watched. Upstairs, Marina hummed to herself, a soft, tuneless melody that carried faintly through the vents. When May went to check on the twins, she found them sitting by the window, wrapped in towels. Hazel's lips were pale, her hair still damp. "Did you finish your bath, sweethearts?" May asked gently. June nodded, her small hand gripping her sister's. "She said it makes us brave," Hazel whispered. May's chest tightened. She crouched down, tucking the blankets tighter around them. "Bravery doesn't come from cold water," she said softly. "It comes from kindness." The girls said nothing, but Hazel leaned into her shoulder for a moment, and May felt the smallest flicker of trust return. That evening, as the light faded, May stood at the kitchen counter, pen trembling in her hand. She took out a piece of paper from the drawer and began to write slowly, carefully, each word chosen like a prayer. "If anything ever happens to me, or to the girls, please go to the Vance house." Something isn't right there. She folded the letter and slipped it into an envelope addressed to her nephew, who worked nights at the Lantern Diner. She'd deliver it tomorrow before her shift, just in case. When she turned, Marina was standing in the doorway. "Writing letters, May?" Her tone was light, but her eyes were sharp. May smiled faintly. "Just a grocery list, ma'am." Marina walked closer, her heels clicking softly on the tile. "You're so loyal," she said, almost admiringly. "You've stayed through everything." She brushed imaginary dust from the counter, her reflection flickering in the polished glass of the cabinet, serene, composed, but with something in the eyes that chilled May more than any cold water ever could. Later that night, Elliot sat at his desk, reading emails. The sound of Marina's laughter drifted faintly from down the hall. For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw movement in the mirror behind his desk. Just a reflection of her passing, perhaps. But the smile in that reflection looked different. He shook it off. "You're tired," he muttered to himself, returning to the screen. But outside, the fog had crept back over the lake, wrapping the house in its gray silence once more. Upstairs, May checked on the twins one last time. She brushed a damp curl from Hazel's forehead and whispered, "Sleep warm, angels." As she turned off the light, she caught her own reflection in the window, her face pale in the moonlight, eyes filled with worry. Behind her, faintly, she thought she saw another figure standing in the hallway, still as a shadow. When she spun around, the corridor was empty. Downstairs, Marina's voice drifted faintly through the air, calm and steady, as if reciting something to herself. "Cold water builds strength. A strong body makes a strong mind." May shivered. For the first time in years, she prayed out loud. 2 weeks passed, and autumn deepened around Monticello Lake. The maple trees had turned from gold to rust, their leaves drifting across the water like forgotten letters. May packed her last suitcase in silence. She had told Elliot she needed rest, a few weeks away to visit family, though she knew she might never return. Something inside her could no longer bear the chill that lived in that house. Elliot helped her carry the bags to the door. "You've been with us so long," he said quietly. "I hope you'll come back when you're ready." May hesitated, searching his face for some trace of understanding. "Take care of the girls," she said. "They need warmth, Mr. Vance, more than they need perfection." He smiled politely, as though she'd offered advice on the weather. "Of course, May. Thank you for everything." The moment she left, Marina closed the door and locked it. "She was getting old," she said briskly, dusting her hands. "I've already arranged for a new caretaker. Young, energetic, well recommended." Claire Benton arrived 3 days later. She was 27, with soft brown hair and eyes that held both gentleness and nerves. Her coat looked second-hand, the buttons mismatched. Still, there was something warm about her, as if she carried a bit of sunlight in her pocket. When she stepped into the nursery, the twins looked up from their blocks. "Hello there," Claire said, kneeling to their level. "I'm Claire. Your dad asked me to take care of you while Miss May's away." June stared at her for a moment, then offered a small wooden horse. Hazel stayed quiet, watching carefully. Claire smiled. "He's handsome," she whispered, taking the toy as if it were a gift of gold. That made June giggle, a sound so pure, it startled even Marina, who had been watching from the doorway. At dinner that evening, Elliot studied Claire with mild curiosity. "You seem to have a calming effect," he said. "The girls haven't laughed like that in months." Claire blushed. "Children just need a little patience, sir. They'll bloom when they feel safe." Marina's hand found his arm under the table. "It's nice to have help again," she said, her smile tight. Elliot nodded absently, unaware of the quiet tension forming between the two women. After supper, Claire carried the twins upstairs. She tucked them in, humming softly. It wasn't a song she'd planned to sing, it just came to her, an old tune from childhood. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." Downstairs, Elliot froze. The melody drifted faintly through the vents, wrapping around him like a ghost of memory. He rose, following the sound up the stairs, his heart caught between grief and wonder. In the nursery doorway, he stopped. Claire was rocking Hazel gently, her voice low and warm. When the song ended, Claire looked up, startled to see him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance," she said quickly. "It just seemed to calm them." He shook his head, his voice soft. "No apology needed. My late wife used to sing that to them." For a long moment, neither spoke. The nightlight painted soft halos around the children's faces. Then Marina's reflection appeared in the mirror behind them, her expression unreadable, her eyes fixed on Claire. That night, the lake reflected a pale half-moon, broken by drifting leaves. Inside the house, the walls seemed to breathe again. For the first time in months, laughter had passed through them, soft and fleeting but real. Claire sat by the twins' beds, reading from a worn storybook she'd brought in her suitcase. The children leaned close, their eyes wide and drowsy. When she closed the book, June whispered, "Stay till we sleep." "I will," Claire promised. She sat quietly, listening to the rhythmic sound of rain returning outside. The twins' breathing slowed, then evened out. For a moment, she forgot where she was, a stranger in a mansion that felt like someone else's memory. Downstairs, Elliot poured himself a small glass of bourbon. The house felt different that evening, as if some lost piece had been found. He could still hear the ghost of that lullaby echoing faintly in his mind. He almost smiled. Then Marina entered, moving like a shadow across the polished floor. "You seem lighter tonight," she said, voice careful. "It's been a while since the girls laughed," he replied. She took the glass from his hand and set it aside. "You give too much of your heart to sentiment, Elliot. The past isn't a comfort, it's an anchor." He studied her expression, trying to find softness in it, but seeing only control disguised as calm. "Maybe anchors keep us steady," he said quietly. Marina's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Not if they keep us from moving forward." She turned, her reflection gliding past the mirror, flawless, cold. Later, as the house slept, Claire woke to the sound of faint music coming from downstairs. She tiptoed to the landing and saw the glow of the living room lamp. Elliot had fallen asleep on the couch, a photo album open on his lap. She recognized the young woman in the pictures, his first wife, holding the twins as babies, her laughter frozen mid-sunlight. Claire felt an ache in her chest, part sympathy, part something unnamed. When she returned to her room, she passed the nursery. The door was half open. She stopped, peering inside. Marina stood by the window, staring at the lake. Her face reflected dimly in the glass. "They trust her already," she murmured, almost to herself. Claire froze, not sure if she was meant to hear. Then Marina turned slightly, her voice soft but edged like ice. "You must be careful whom you let close, Claire. Children remember the smallest things. and forget the ones that matter. Claire managed a polite nod. I'll keep that in mind, Mrs. Vance. Marina smiled, the kind that looked painted on. Good girl. She brushed past her, leaving the faint scent of lavender and something colder behind. Claire stood in the hallway long after Marina's footsteps faded. In the nursery, the night light flickered once, then steadied, casting the twins' faces in a warm golden hue. She closed the door quietly and leaned against the wall, her heartbeat slowing. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called across the lake. The sound echoed through the empty corridors, like a reminder that peace, in this house, was never meant to last. By late October, Monticello Lake had turned steel gray, and the air carried the smell of pine and distant rain. The Vance mansion looked peaceful from the outside windows, glowing gold in the early dusk, but inside, something always felt slightly off, like a melody just out of tune. Claire began to notice the small things first. The nursery door sometimes stood ajar when she was sure she'd closed it. The twins would wake from naps trembling, whispering that they'd heard a lady humming in the dark. When she'd ask who, they'd point to the corner where no one stood. One morning, while folding linens, Claire heard a faint metallic sound, like a chain dragging coming from the basement hallway. Curious, she followed the noise until she reached a small wooden door at the end of the corridor. It was older than the rest of the house, its paint cracked, the handle cold. A label hung crookedly on the frame. Storage. Keep locked. When she pressed her ear against it, silence. Then something faint. A single knock. She stepped back, heart racing. Hello? She called softly. No reply. The sound stopped, replaced by the light creak of footsteps upstairs. Marina's voice floated down, calm as ever. Claire? What are you doing in the basement? Claire turned quickly. I thought I heard something down here. A pipe, maybe. Marina's expression remained pleasant, but her eyes were unreadable. This part of the house is off limits. It's old, unsafe. Best you stay clear. Claire nodded, embarrassed, yet her instincts hummed with unease. When Marina left, she lingered another moment, staring at the door's rusted handle. That night, while reading bedtime stories, June asked, Miss Claire, is the lady under the floor nice? The question chilled her. What lady, sweetheart? She asked gently. The one who hums when Mommy's gone. Hazel murmured sleepily. She said she wants to come upstairs. Claire's hand tightened on the book. You just had a dream, honey. But later, as she turned off the light, she heard it too, a faint melody rising through the floorboards, the same haunting lullaby she'd sung to the girls on her first night. Downstairs, Elliot sat by the fire, staring into the flames. He'd spent the evening reviewing construction plans for a new lakeside development. Marina entered quietly, handing him tea. You work too hard, she said. He took the cup absently. I can't afford mistakes right now. She smiled faintly. You never could. Her tone carried something heavier than teasing, something that made him look up. Marina, he said slowly, did you ever hear singing in this house? Her hand stilled for a moment on the back of his chair. Then she laughed softly. You've been listening to Claire's imagination, haven't you? She's sweet, but overly sensitive. Like your first wife. Elliot frowned, setting the cup down. The mention of his late wife hung in the air like smoke. When he went to bed later, the wind had picked up outside. The old walls creaked. Upstairs, Claire checked the twins one last time. As she turned away from their cribs, she caught a glint of light beneath the door at the end of the hallway, the basement key hanging from a hook, swaying slightly, though no one had touched it. She froze, her breath visible in the cold air. Somewhere below, a door clicked shut on its own. The next morning dawned with a veil of fog crawling over the lake, swallowing the outlines of boats and trees. Claire brewed coffee in the quiet kitchen, the smell of roasted beans filling the air, grounding her nerves. But when she looked out the window, she saw Marina standing in the garden, motionless, her pale coat bright against the gray. She was staring at the ground near the rose bushes, as if something there was buried. Claire blinked, and Marina turned, waving cheerfully. Morning, Claire. Such lovely fog today, isn't it? Her voice carried too easily through the glass, her smile perfect. But when Claire waved back, the unease in her stomach deepened. Later, as the twins napped, Claire searched for extra blankets in the hallway closet. Behind a pile of sheets, She found an old ledger, thin, dusty, with house expenses written on the cover in fading ink. Flipping through it, she noticed neat handwriting Marina's listing purchases: linens, candles, groceries, and, circled several times, sedatives, mild doses. Her fingers trembled. Just then, footsteps echoed behind her. She turned too quickly, the ledger falling from her hands. Marina stood in the doorway, her expression calm but sharp. "Looking for something?" Claire forced a smile. "Just more blankets for the girls." Marina bent down, picking up the ledger. "You should ask next time," she said lightly. "Old records can be misleading." "Of course, Mrs. Vance." Marina brushed invisible dust from the cover, eyes glinting. "You're doing such a fine job. The children seem livelier. I'd hate for that peace to be disturbed." Her voice held no warmth, only warning. That evening, Elliot returned home early, drenched from rain. "Power's flickering downtown," he said, setting down his coat. "I'll check the basement fuse." Claire's heart jumped. "Let me get a flashlight for you," she offered, following him down the corridor. The old door groaned as he unlocked it. The air that spilled out was cold and metallic. Claire hesitated at the top of the stairs, her flashlight cutting a beam through the dust. "Strange," Elliot murmured, crouching by the fuse box. "Did you hear that?" Before Claire could answer, they both heard it, a soft, dragging sound behind the far wall, followed by a faint humming, the same lullaby, the one Clara, his late wife, used to sing. Elliot froze. "That's impossible," Claire whispered. "It's been happening for weeks." He turned toward her, shock in his face. "You heard it too?" Before either could move, Marina's voice echoed from above, tight with sudden urgency. "Elliot? Claire? Stay away from that room." They looked at each other. Elliot's hand tightened on the flashlight. He stepped toward the small wooden door built into the basement wall, the one Claire had found before. The humming stopped. He reached for the handle. "Elliot, don't!" Marina shouted, descending the stairs, her calm gone, her eyes wild. "It's nothing, just old pipes." But he turned the handle anyway. Inside was a small, unfinished space, bare walls, old toys, a child's blanket, and a tin container half buried in dust. On top lay a family photograph: Clara, Elliot, and the twins as newborns. Clara's eyes were crossed out with ink. Elliot's breath caught. "What is this?" Marina's voice broke. "I was protecting them. You couldn't let her go. You kept her ghost in this house." Claire stepped between them. "Protecting them from what, Marina?" Marina's face crumpled for a second, then hardened. "From weakness. From the past. From you people who keep bringing her back." A low rumble shook the house, thunder rolling over the lake. Elliot stepped back, holding the photo, tears in his eyes. "You buried her memory like she was shame." And Marina's voice was low now, trembling. "You never saw how much I gave up for this family." Claire's flashlight flickered out, plunging the room into dim light. For a moment, only Marina's breathing filled the space. Then she whispered, "Maybe I should have stayed in the dark with her." Upstairs, the twins began to cry. The night broke open with thunder, and rain lashed against the windows like angry fingers. Elliot ran up the basement stairs 2 at a time, the photograph still clutched in his hand. The twins' cries grew louder, desperate and frightened. Claire followed close behind, her heart pounding, while Marina's footsteps echoed a beat, slower, hesitant, uneven. When they reached the nursery, the power flickered once and went out. Only the lightning lit the room, flashing across the faces of the girls huddled together in their crib. Claire knelt beside them, her voice steady despite her fear. "It's okay, darlings. You're safe now." Elliot stood at the doorway, drenched and pale. He looked around the room, the toys neatly arranged, the framed photo of Clara, and the babies still on the shelf, and something inside him broke. "She kept this room exactly as Clara left it," he whispered, "even after everything." Marina stood behind him, her silhouette outlined by lightning. "Because she couldn't move on," she said softly. "You couldn't either, and—" Her voice trembled not with anger now, but exhaustion. Claire rose slowly, turning toward her. "Marina, what happened to you? Why hide all this?" For a long moment, Marina didn't answer. Then she walked to the window and stared into the storm. "You think I was always this way?" she said quietly. "When Clara died, he was broken. I thought if I built something perfect, if I kept every room spotless, every meal warm, he'd see me. He'd stop looking at her picture. But every time he looked at those girls, I saw her in their eyes. Lightning flashed again, revealing the tears streaking down her face. So I tried to make them strong. Cold water, no tears, no weakness, because I thought maybe if they were different, he could love me for saving them. Elliot's voice was hoarse. You were supposed to love them for who they were, Marina, not for who you wanted them to be. Marina turned, her face pale and hollow. And you? Did you ever love me? Or was I just a way to fill the silence after she was gone? The room fell silent, but for the rain drumming on the roof. The twins had stopped crying, clutching each other as if they understood more than they should. Claire stepped forward, her tone gentle but firm. Maybe you both forgot that the girls didn't need someone to be perfect. They just needed someone to stay. Marina's lips parted, a soft sound escaping her half-sob, half-breath. Stay? She whispered. No one ever stayed for me. A heavy crash of thunder shook the glass panes. The youngest twin, Hazel, whimpered, reaching toward the photo still in Elliot's hand. He looked down at it, the image of Clara smiling under sunlight, and then back at Marina. For the first time, his anger gave way to pity. You don't have to keep fighting her ghost, he said quietly. She's gone. But the family you still have? He gestured to the children. They're right here. Marina looked at them all, her eyes darting between the twins and the man she once believed she'd saved. For a moment, her expression softened, then hardened again. No, she murmured. You'll all leave me too. And with that, she turned and fled the room. Elliot called after her, but the slam of the front door drowned out his voice. The sound echoed through the storm like the closing of something final. Claire held Hazel close, feeling the child's heartbeat against her own. She'll come back, she said softly, though her voice betrayed doubt. Elliot didn't answer. He stared out the window toward the lake, where flashes of lightning danced on the water. Somewhere beyond the waves, Marina's car headlights flickered briefly, swallowed by the dark. Downstairs, the grandfather clock chimed once, then fell silent. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving the lake shrouded in mist. The house stood silent, heavy with the weight of the night before. Claire moved through the rooms quietly, gathering the girls' blankets, trying to keep them occupied. Every so often, Hazel would glance at the front door and whisper, Mommy's coming back? Claire knelt down beside her. She will, sweetheart, she said softly, though she wasn't sure. But until then, you've got us. Elliot hadn't slept. He sat in the living room with the old photograph of Clara in his hands, his eyes swollen and red. The fire had burned down to ash. When Claire entered, he looked up, his voice raw. I should have seen it, Claire. I kept pretending everything was fine. I thought if I ignored the cracks, they'd disappear. She shook her head gently. You were grieving. We all break in different ways. He gave a weary half-smile. You sound like someone who knows. I do, she said quietly. When my brother died, my mother tried to keep everything exactly the same. Same seat at the table, same toys on the shelf. I used to think that was love keeping things frozen. But love isn't about freezing time. It's about letting it thaw. Elliot looked at her for a long moment, then turned toward the window. Marina isn't evil, he said at last. She's just lost, like I was. Just then, the crunch of tires on wet gravel broke the silence. Claire and Elliot exchanged glances. He stood, heart pounding, as the front door opened. Marina stepped inside, drenched, her hair plastered to her face. Her eyes were red, but her voice was steady. I went to the bridge, she said simply. I almost kept driving. Elliot's voice cracked. Why didn't you? Marina looked at the twins standing on the stairs, clutching each other in their pajamas. Because they were still crying, she whispered. And I realized I didn't want the last thing they remembered of me to be silence. Hazel ran forward, wrapping her tiny arms around Marina's legs. June followed, timid at first, then clutching her dress. Marina froze, then slowly knelt down, her shaking hands stroking their hair. I'm sorry, she said over and over, as though the words could undo every cold morning and every fearful night. Elliot's shoulders slumped. He turned away, fighting tears, and Claire quietly stepped back to give them space. Outside, the mist began to lift from the lake, the first sunlight breaking through. Claire opened the window a little. The air smelled of rain and pine, clean, forgiving. Marina looked up at Elliot. "I can't fix what I did," she said. "But I can start again, if you'll let me." He hesitated, then nodded slowly. "For them," he said, glancing at the girls. "For all of us." Claire smiled faintly, the tension in her chest easing. "Maybe this house finally gets to breathe again," she murmured. The clock in the hallway chimed softly, marking a new hour. The sound carried through the house, steady and calm. As the twins giggled and ran toward the kitchen, sunlight spilled across the floorboards. Marina followed them, her steps uncertain but lighter. Elliot lingered by the window, the photograph of Clara still in his hand. He looked at it one last time before setting it gently on the mantel. "She'd want this," he said quietly. Claire nodded. "She'd want them to have warmth." Elliot turned to her, his voice low. "Thank you, Claire. You kept them safe when I couldn't." I didn't do it alone," she said softly, glancing toward the light now filling the house. "Sometimes it takes a storm to teach us what home really means." Outside, the lake shimmered under the morning sun, no longer gray, but silver blue and alive. By the following weekend, Monticello Lake had turned clear as glass again. The storm had washed the world clean. You could smell the earth after rain, hear the ducks settling back near the reeds, and see sunlight dancing on the ripples like tiny sparks of forgiveness. Inside the Vance home, the air felt different, still cautious, but lighter somehow, as if each room had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. Claire stood at the kitchen counter early that morning, pouring cocoa for the twins. They sat at the table in matching sweaters, giggling over toast shaped like stars. Marina entered quietly, her hair tied up, a pale blue scarf draped loosely around her shoulders. She hesitated at the doorway, as though unsure of her place. Hazel looked up first and smiled. "Mommy, want some cocoa?" The word mommy struck her like a bell, soft but deep. Marina blinked, nodding quickly. "I'd love some," she said, her voice trembling. She sat down slowly, and for the first time, her hands didn't shake as she reached for a cup. Claire watched from the sink, pretending to fuss with dishes, though what she really saw was something small but miraculous, the first quiet step toward healing. Later that day, Elliot returned from town with a bundle of old letters. "They found some of Clara's things in a storage box," he said, setting it on the table. The girls were playing in the garden, and Marina stood by the window, her expression unreadable. Claire picked up the top envelope. The handwriting was delicate, looping Clara's unmistakable hand. The first letter began, "If you're reading this, I hope the house still smells like cinnamon on Sundays." Elliot's voice caught. "She used to bake on Sundays, even when she was sick." Marina turned from the window, her voice soft. "Maybe we could read them together, later, as a family." Claire smiled gently. "That might be good for everyone." After lunch, they all went outside. The twins played near the old tin basin that now held bright yellow marigolds, Marina's idea. "Flowers that forgive," she'd said. Claire and Elliot carried a small table and 2 chairs to the lake's edge. The air was cool, touched with pine and memory. Elliot unfolded the first letter, his hand steady but his breath slow. "Clara wrote about the girls," he said. "She worried they'd forget her laugh. She said, 'Love needs to be seen, not just spoken.'" He looked up, his eyes glinting with the reflection of water. "I think that's what we all forgot." Marina sat quietly, her gaze on the lake. "When I first came here," she admitted, "I thought if I scrubbed every wall clean, I could erase her. But it's not about erasing." She touched the letter gently. "It's about remembering the right things." Claire smiled faintly. "Sometimes memories are like letters we never mailed. They find their way back when we're finally ready to open them." The afternoon sunlight mellowed, turning golden. The girls chased each other across the yard, their laughter bright against the quiet lake. Elliot watched them, a smile pulling at the corners of his mouth. For the first time in a long while, he didn't see ghosts, just his family, still imperfect but alive. Behind them, the house glowed in the fading light, windows reflecting the calm of the lake. The past was still there, but now it sat quietly, like old letters resting in a box, red but no longer heavy. The following days settled into a rhythm the house hadn't known in years. Morning sunlight filtered through clean windows. carrying the smell of cinnamon and wet wood. Marina began baking again, clumsy at first, burning a batch or two, but the girls cheered her anyway. Each small act of normalcy felt like stitching a torn fabric back together. Elliot spent his evenings reading Clara's letters aloud by the fire. There weren't many, just half a dozen, but each one carried her warmth like a lamp glowing through fog. One letter spoke about forgiveness. Love doesn't always mean staying, sometimes it means leaving room for others to heal. When he finished, silence hung in the air. Claire felt her throat tighten. "She wrote that for you," she said quietly. Elliot nodded. "And maybe for all of us." Outside, the twins had built a tiny paper boat fleet, letting them drift along the shore of the lake. Marina joined them, sitting cross-legged on the damp grass. Hazel pointed toward the largest boat, whispering, "That one's Mommy's letter." Marina smiled faintly. "Then, let's see how far it sails." They watched as the paper boat floated out, its reflection trembling on the water. It tipped once, steadied, and kept going. Later that night, Claire sat alone on the porch, sipping tea. The air was cool, the kind of quiet that comes only after a storm. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to see Marina. "I wanted to thank you," Marina said softly, "for not giving up on us." Claire smiled. "I didn't fix anything. You did the hardest part yourself, staying." Marina looked toward the lake, where moonlight rippled like brush silver. "I still see her sometimes," she whispered. "Not as a ghost, more like a memory reminding me to be gentle." "And that's not haunting," Claire said. "That's grace." For a long moment they sat in silence, listening to the crickets and the soft lapping of the water. The house behind them glowed faintly, not cold and sterile now, but warm, lived in. Inside, Elliot tucked the girls into bed. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll have a picnic by the lake. Maybe bring those paper boats again." "Can Miss Claire come?" June asked sleepily. Elliot smiled. "She wouldn't miss it." When he turned off the lamp, the soft night wrapped around them, peaceful and whole. Down by the shore, one lone paper boat still floated, a fragile thing, illuminated by the moon carrying a letter that needed no words, just the quiet truth of a family finally learning how to forgive. The morning sun arrived softly, brushing Monticello Lake with a shimmer that looked almost like forgiveness. Mist still floated above the water, curling around the edges of the dock like it didn't want to leave. The house smelled of pancakes and cinnamon scents that once had belonged to a different life. Marina moved through the kitchen quietly, the hem of her dress brushing against the wooden floor. Her hands were busy stacking bread, cutting fruit, but her mind wandered. For the first time in months, her motions felt natural, unforced. The silence in the room was no longer sharp, it was gentle. Behind her, the sound of small feet pattering down the hallway made her smile. "Mommy," Hazel called. "We're ready, we got the blanket." June followed close behind, dragging the checkered red and cream picnic cloth that was almost as big as she was. They were both still barefoot, hair tangled from sleep, but their eyes were bright, the kind of brightness that comes only when a child feels safe. Elliot entered next, sleeves rolled up, tie undone. He looked at the twins and laughed. "You two look like you're ready to climb a mountain." "We are," June said proudly. "But we're starting with a picnic first." He bent down, helping them fold the blanket. "Then we'll need sandwiches for our expedition." "Already made," Marina said, nodding toward the basket. "Turkey, cheese, and a few extra slices of pie that somehow survived breakfast." A warm laugh came from the back door. Claire, holding a jug of lemonade in one hand, a straw hat in the other. "I can vouch for that," she said, smiling. "One slice didn't survive." "Miss Claire," the twins squealed, running to her. They wrapped around her legs, and she pretended to topple over, laughing. When Marina looked at the scene, her chest ached, but not from jealousy this time, from gratitude. There was no bitterness in her heart, only the quiet wonder of seeing her children laugh again. By mid-morning, they were on their way. The air was clear, filled with the scent of pine and the faraway hum of church bells. The path to the lake wound through golden grass and late-blooming daisies. Claire walked with the twins ahead, holding their hands, pointing out butterflies and stones shaped like hearts. Behind them, Elliot carried the basket, and Marina walked beside him, her pace steady, her silence comfortable. When they reached the willow tree that leaned over the lake like an old friend, the twins gasped. "This is perfect," Hazel said. The grass there was soft, scattered with sunlight. The water shimmered with gentle ripples, each one catching the blue of the sky. They spread the red blanket beneath the tree, and the air seemed to sigh with them, as if the lake itself was glad to see them gathered together. Marina unpacked the food, lining sandwiches in neat rows. Claire poured lemonade into mason jars, the light turning the liquid into liquid gold. Elliot sat cross-legged on the grass, taking in the sight before him, his daughter's laughter, his wife's easy smile, the calm water. It felt almost like stepping into a memory that had finally come true. "Do you think lakes remember things?" Hazel asked suddenly. Marina tilted her head. "Maybe," she said. "But only the good parts." Claire smiled, handing Hazel her cup.
"Then we'd better give it something new to remember."
They clinked their jars together like a toast, the sunlight flashing through the glass. Lunch was simple but perfect. Turkey sandwiches, sliced apples, small pies that tasted of cinnamon and butter. The twins ate lying on their stomachs, feet swinging in the air. Marina and Claire sat side by side, their skirts brushing lightly in the breeze. For a while, no one talked much. The peace didn't need words. The wind hummed through the willow leaves, and somewhere far off, a loon called across the water. After they'd eaten, June tugged at Claire's sleeve. "Can we make boats again, like before?" Claire nodded. "Of course. But this time, each boat needs a wish." They tore small sheets from her notebook. Hazel wrote slowly, her letters uneven. June drew hearts instead of words. Elliot folded the paper carefully into small white boats, helping them press each crease. Marina watched them with quiet awe. Once, she had believed healing needed grand gestures, apologies shouted to the sky. Now she saw it for what it truly was, a soft, ordinary afternoon, the laughter of two children, and a lake that kept all secrets gently. When the boats were ready, they waded to the water's edge. The twins set them afloat, whispering wishes that only the lake would hear. The paper boats bobbed, delicate and brave, carrying everything unsaid toward the center of the water. Behind them, Marina whispered to Claire,
"You've done more for this family than I ever could."
Claire shook her head. "No, Marina, I just reminded you of who you already were." The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of marigolds from the garden. The sunlight stretched longer, softer. The first part of the day had passed in peace, and for the first time in a long time, not one of them felt afraid of what would come next. By late afternoon, the lake glowed with that gentle amber light that only comes once a year when summer's nearly gone. But autumn hasn't yet taken hold. The twins were chasing dragonflies through the reeds, their laughter skipping across the surface of the water. Elliot lay back on the blanket, hands behind his head, eyes half closed. He could hear them laughing and Marina humming softly as she packed the empty jars. "Feels like I've been gone a long time," he murmured. Claire looked at him, curious. "Gone?" He nodded. "Not from here, but from them. From myself." She smiled faintly. "You found your way home. That's what matters." He turned toward her. "You're leaving soon." It wasn't a question. Claire's eyes softened. "Tomorrow. There's a small church school in Cedar Falls. They need someone to help with their reading program. I promised I'd go." Marina looked up from the basket. "They're lucky," she said simply. "But we'll miss you." And Claire's smile reached her eyes. "Then I'll have to come back, maybe for the girl's birthday." Hazel ran up out of breath. "Miss Claire, look! The boats are still floating." They all turned toward the lake. Far from shore, a cluster of tiny white dots shimmered in the sunlight. "They're carrying our wishes," June said solemnly. "All the way to heaven." Marina's hand went to her heart. "Maybe they are." They sat together watching until the boats became too small to see. The world was quiet except for the soft rustle of leaves and the low hum of crickets in the grass. As the sun lowered, Claire stood, brushing off her skirt. She walked a few steps toward the water, the reflection of the sky rippling around her feet. "You know," she said, "I think this lake will remember us now. Not the pain, not the shouting, just this." Elliot rose and joined her. "You've given this house something I couldn't," he said. Claire turned to him, the light painting her face in gold. "You gave it to yourself. I just helped you notice." Behind them, Marina had gathered the twins on her lap. June was already nodding off, her cheek against her mother's shoulder. Hazel whispered, "Can we stay a little longer?" "Just a little," Marina said. Claire looked back at them, the picture of what she had come to mend. The ache in her chest wasn't sorrow. It was gratitude. She'd been part of something fragile and true, and now it could stand on its own. When they finally packed up, the first stars had begun to show. The path home wound through fields glowing with fireflies. Elliot carried the basket. Marina held Hazel's hand. Claire walked beside June, who sleepily recited the names of constellations she didn't really know. At the house, the twins went straight to bed, still smelling of grass and sunlight. Marina tucked them in and kissed their foreheads. "Sweet dreams, my brave girls," she whispered. Downstairs, Claire stood by the door with her coat folded over her arm. Elliot handed her a small envelope. "In case you need to find your way back," he said quietly. She smiled. "Or in case you need to." Marina approached, hesitating before embracing her. The hug was brief, but real. "Be safe," she said. "I will." Claire looked between them. "You've both done something incredible today. You made peace sound like laughter again." Outside, the night was calm. The lake reflected the moon in perfect stillness. Before stepping into her car, Claire turned back one last time. Through the window, she could see the glow of the living room lamp and the silhouettes of a family no longer broken. She whispered to herself, "This is what healing looks like." As the engine hummed softly and the road curved away from the lake, the wind carried the faintest echo of laughter, two little girls, and a promise of tomorrow. The sun rose gently over Monticello Lake, the surface of the water shimmering like glass touched by light. Mist drifted lazily across the shore, clinging to the reeds before dissolving into the crisp morning air. Inside the Vance house, everything was still peaceful in a way that once seemed impossible. The twins slept late, tangled together in a heap of blankets, their soft breaths filling the nursery. Marina stood in the doorway, watching them, a smile hesitant but real tugged at the corners of her mouth. The room smelled faintly of lavender and cocoa, not disinfectant or fear. On the dresser, a small jar of folded paper letters caught the light, glowing faintly like captured sunshine. Downstairs, Elliot sat at the kitchen table. The morning light slanted across his face, catching the silver in his hair. He wasn't reading the newspaper or checking his phone, just staring at the mug of coffee cooling in front of him. On the counter lay an envelope with his name written in a familiar looping hand. Mr. Vance. He turned it over twice before opening it. The paper crackled softly in the quiet. "Mr. Vance, when I arrived here, this house felt like it was holding its breath. Every wall, every hallway, even the lake outside seemed to wait for someone to speak the right words. But I realize now it didn't need words, it needed love to return. You once told me that some stories take longer to find their ending. I think yours is one of those rare ones that doesn't end at all, it just changes chapters. Don't let silence become the language of this family again. Let the girls laugh loudly. Let Marina sing when she bakes, even if she burns the bread. Fill this house with noise, the good kind, the kind that means you're alive. And if the past ever knocks again, open the door gently. Sometimes ghosts only want to see that you've healed. Thank you for letting me witness a family remember how to love each other. If you ever need to find me, I'll be somewhere by a smaller lake with a wooden porch, baking bread and waiting for letters that don't need replies. Claire." Elliot's fingers trembled slightly as he folded the letter. The air felt thicker somehow, full of memory. He didn't cry, he just breathed, long and deep, as if he'd been holding that breath for years. Marina entered quietly, her hair still loose from sleep. "You got a letter," she said softly, glancing at the paper in his hands. He nodded, sliding it toward her. "She said we should make noise." Marina read silently, her eyes tracing each word, her lips pressing together halfway through. When she finished, she rested the letter on the table and sat down across from him. "She made everything sound so simple," she whispered. "Like forgiveness was just another room you could walk into." Elliot looked at her. "Maybe it is," he said. "We just forget where the door is." For a moment, they sat together in the quiet hum of the morning. Then, somewhere upstairs, a small sound broke the stillness, a giggle, followed by the thud of tiny feet. The twins barreled into the kitchen, hair wild and eyes shining. "Mommy, we made breakfast," June announced. holding up a plate smeared with peanut butter and crumbs. Marina laughed, a sound Elliot realized he hadn't heard in years. Light, surprised, alive. You did, huh? Well then, we better eat it before it disappears. As the girls chattered and laughed, Elliot rose and opened the window. The breeze carried in the smell of the lake, cool and earthy. For the first time, the sound of laughter didn't echo through empty halls, it filled them. After breakfast, Marina helped the twins write more notes to add to the jar on the dresser. Hazel said, "Thank you for the sunshine." June said, "For the warm water now, not the cold." Marina's note was simple, for staying. That afternoon, Elliot found himself by the garden bench, the same one Claire used to sit on. He sanded the old wood smooth and painted it white. When it dried, he placed a small plaque at the back, "For those who come to heal." Then he planted a ring of marigolds around it. Their gold petals caught the late sunlight, trembling in the breeze. From the porch, Marina watched him, one hand shading her eyes. The wind carried the laughter of the twins down to the water, mingling with the faint rustle of the trees. Later that evening, as twilight painted the sky with lavender and rose, Marina found another envelope tucked in the kitchen drawer, this one addressed not to Elliot, but to the house by the lake. Her breath caught as she unfolded it. Inside, there was only one line, written in Claire's delicate handwriting. "You were never broken just waiting for love to move back in." Marina pressed the letter to her chest. For the first time, she felt that the walls around her weren't closing in, they were listening. And in that stillness, she finally understood. The house hadn't been haunted by ghosts. It had only been waiting for forgiveness, for warmth, for a family to remember itself. Evening came softly, the kind of calm that made every sound feel sacred, the hum of cicadas in the trees, the quiet rhythm of waves brushing the dock, the laughter of children fading into the distance. Monticello Lake shimmered beneath the pale gold of sunset, and for once, it felt like the whole world had stopped to breathe. Elliot carried a basket of bread and fruit down to the garden. The air smelled of cinnamon and earth, the same scent that had filled the house when Clara was alive. Yet now, it no longer carried pain. It carried peace. Marina followed behind him, her hands stained with soil from the marigolds she'd been tending. The twins trailed after, each holding a paper lantern decorated with crayon hearts and crooked stars. They set the basket down by the bench. The plaque gleamed faintly in the fading light. "For those who come to heal." Marina brushed her palms on her apron. "It's funny," she said softly. "This house used to feel too big for me. Now it finally feels like home." Elliot looked toward the lake, where the last rays of sun turned the surface into liquid bronze. "Home was never the walls," he said. "It was what we were afraid to let back in." Hazel ran forward, tugging his sleeve. "Daddy, can we light them now?" He smiled. "Go ahead, sweetheart." The twins knelt by the water's edge, their tiny lanterns glowing faintly in the dusk. They pushed them out gently, one by one, watching as the lights drifted across the lake like floating stars. The breeze carried them farther, scattering them in a slow, graceful line. Marina slipped her hand into Elliot's, and for the first time, he didn't pull away. Their fingers intertwined awkwardly, tenderly, like two people learning to speak the same language again. Behind them, the house glowed through the trees, warm light spilling from the kitchen, the soft hum of a record spinning an old tune Claire used to play. Her absence didn't feel like a hole anymore. It felt like a presence, quiet, steady, a thread still woven through their lives. As the twins chased fireflies, Marina whispered, "Do you think she's happy now, wherever she is?" Elliot nodded, his eyes on the lanterns drifting away. "I think she's smiling. Claire, too." Marina turned to him, puzzled. "Claire." He smiled faintly. "She left a letter for the house." Marina's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Of course she did." The wind stirred again, carrying the scent of marigolds and lake water. One of the paper lanterns caught a stronger breeze and rose slightly, its flame flickering like a heartbeat before settling back down. The twins squealed in delight. Marina laughed, the sound soft and full. "It's beautiful," she said. Elliot nodded. So were second chances. They stayed there until the last of the light faded. The twins grew drowsy, curling up on the blanket. The night crept in gently, no ghosts, no fear, Just the sound of crickets and the quiet sigh of a house finally at rest. Before going inside, Marina turned for one last look at the lake. The lanterns still floated, their reflections trembling on the surface. She whispered a few words to the wind she didn't need to say to whom. "Thank you for staying long enough to show us the way." Inside, she placed the letter addressed to the house by the lake on the mantel, beside the marigolds, and a small photo of Clara. The flame from a nearby candle flickered once, then steadied, casting a soft glow across the room. The home that had once held grief now held grace. The laughter of two little girls drifted upstairs, the warmth of the kitchen light wrapped around them like an embrace. And outside, under the quiet stars, the last lantern bobbed gently against the shore, carrying with it the story of a house that had finally remembered how to love. Sometimes, life has a way of circling back to where the silence first began. The house by the lake, once echoing with grief and ghosts, now hummed with laughter, the soft clatter of morning cups, and the gentle sound of forgiveness finding its voice. What was once cold had turned warm again, not because time erased the pain, but because love had quietly taken root where sorrow used to live. In the end, Marina learned that redemption doesn't arrive in grand gestures, it grows from the courage to stay. Elliot discovered that second chances don't rebuild the past. They create something better, brick by brick, word by word. And Claire, the quiet witness, became the thread that stitched it all together, reminding them that kindness doesn't fix broken people, it helps them remember they were never broken at all. When the lanterns drifted across the lake that final night, they carried no ghosts, only light. And maybe that's all any of us can hope for in the twilight of our days, to let what hurt us drift away and keep only the glow of what healed us. The lesson is simple, but eternal love. Forgiveness and family are not given once. They are chosen again and again. A small act of compassion, a gentle word spoken at the right time, can change an entire house, a life, even a heart. Just like the porch light left burning in the dark, a little warmth is often all someone needs to find their way home. So tonight, dear friends, as you listen from your kitchens, your porches, or your quiet rooms filled with old memories, take a moment to breathe in the peace that forgiveness brings. Think about the people who once made your house a home, and maybe reach out to them again. If this story touched your heart, type 1" the comments so we'll know it found its way to you. If you think it could be told better, press 0. We'll listen, just as every good story listens back. And remember, happiness doesn't come from perfection. It comes from the courage to love even after the storm.